Yamini, welcome to the Industrial Growth Podcast. I'm very excited to have you today. How are you?
Very good, Karim. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. You're an amazing partner for Hubspot, and I know for sure that we'll have a great conversation here.
Thank you. Can you maybe introduce yourself to a French audience that maybe they didn't know you as I can know you because I'm a HubSpot partner, but the audience need to understand better who you are at HubSpot.
Absolutely. Happy to. My name is Yamini. I have been at HubSpot now for about a year and a half. I joined in January of 2020 as the Chief Customer Officer at HubSpot. Now, HubSpot, maybe you know, but we are number one CRM for scaling companies. That's our aspiration. And part of that was actually internally looking at our customer-facing functions and saying, hey, we need to organize marketing, sales, customer success, all of these teams together so we can serve our customers better. And we call it the flywheel. And that's why, we went out and got a chief customer officer. I was pretty excited to join the company. And my role is to work with partners and work with customers and work with our internal teams so we can deliver great experiences for our customers.
So you are here to ensure that customers will be fine with HubSpot, and your role is dedicated to that.
That's exactly right, Karim.
You have been in other companies like Dropbox or SAP. What have you learned about growing a business from your time at companies, at big companies like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before joining HubSpot, I spent about a decade in other cloud B2B businesses. I spent about 5 years at Workday, which is a cloud, HR financial services provider, and also Dropbox. And then before that, I spent about a decade across Siebel and SAP. And I started my career before that as an engineer. And I'd say over the last 25 years, Karim, I've gone from being a product-centric person to a value-centric person to a customer-centric person. And the product centricity, very early stages of my career as an engineer, you cared a lot about product, features, functionality. So even when I left my engineering roots and started in product marketing organizations, originally at Siebel, I was very, very product focused. And then SAP actually taught me to be very value focused. When I was at SAP, the industry was going through this transition of talking about the value that customers received, not necessarily the bells and whistles of each of the products. And so as part of this value engineering team, talking and articulating the value that customers received and, from technology. So that taught me to have a lot of empathy for the decision-making process and also how customers got value. I'd say over the last 10 years, especially being in SaaS within technology, it's very clear that it's not just about winning a customer. It is about serving the customer, retaining the customer, and continuously providing great experiences for the customer. The industry has transitioned, to not just celebrating the win, but really celebrating, customer success. And so that has deeply influenced how I've thought about it. And now I think of everything, from the very beginning as customer centric. And so I think that's kind of what I've learned in my journey.
Thank you. It remember me one thing from Brian Halligan last inbound when we were able to travel. He said that speaking about Amazon and this kind of companies, the reason they win is how they sell. How they sell is why they win was exact citation.
That's exactly right.
You took your job at Hubspot last year, just maybe 3 months after you you took the job. This pandemic occurred. How do you think things have changed since 2020 and since all the things we go through with this pandemic and this coronavirus problem?
Oh my God, isn't it crazy? In the last 18 months, the world has changed so dramatically. And you're right. I started in January and then, in fact, visited Dublin, our office in Dublin. We had a new office opening in Dublin in the first week of March. And as soon as we came back, it felt like the gates shut off in terms of international travel. And the world has been completely different. I think the pandemic has really changed our perspective, both in personal lives as well as business lives. A lot of our customers, maybe the beginning of last year, they were thinking about digital transformation. They were thinking about being digital ready. But then when they got through and they started looking at what are we going to do to survive? And then what are we going to do to thrive? And then what are we going to do to accelerate? It all comes down to being able to serve your customers in this digital only world that we are kind of right now living in. And so the world has really dramatically changed. The expectations that we have of businesses have changed, and a lot of our customers have had to adapt very, very quickly to that change that we have seen. And so Karim, I don't think we're going backwards. I think, the kind of marketing that we're doing and we're seeing right now, the kind of transition to inside sales, the kind of transition to hybrid work that most of us are facing for the second half of this year, it's not going to go backwards. And I think we are in a very different, place. And I'd say that change sometimes happens really slowly and then it leaps forward, and we are at the point that we have kind of really leapt forward in terms of digital transformation.
We will not go back. Go back. Do you think it is something that apply to manufacturing companies? I know that before the pandemic, I was talking with a HubSpot sales rep. They were very skeptical about the manufacturing business. And now we see there is a lot of things that happened in this business too. They are starting to move like an old dinosaur trying to wake up. Did you observe this movement in the manufacturing market?
Absolutely. I mean, the manufacturing market a lot more. You talk to our customers in Germany, France, and a lot of different countries, but it's a change in terms of overall behavior across multiple countries. I mean, one of our manufacturing customers is Lloyd's British. I don't know if you've heard of Lloyd's British. They provide lifting and equipment, inspection services in the UK, and they've been around for 200 years. Now, think about a company that has been around for a really, really long period of time. What we're seeing, is that they've taken the last 18 months to say, how do we adapt forward into this digital transformation that's happening? They've completely redesigned their website. There was zero ability for them to be able to report and a very, very hard user experience. And it made it very difficult for their customers to interact with them digitally, and then for them to be able to get the leads and follow up. And so what they've done is they've built a completely new website. They've based it on a new customer journey mapping and keyword analysis. And so they've really transformed, and this is what is helping them propel into the growth. So, that's an example of a 200-year-old company that has had its ways, that's very much in the manufacturing sector, and that's transforming. And I think almost every company, whether you're in manufacturing or on a different vertical, you have to start thinking about the fact that the way you interact with your customers starts with your website, and then it moves into every interaction that you can possibly have and the data about every one of those interactions. So very much happening across industries, Karim.
Yes, I agree. What are the biggest takeaways from this year we've been through for our company? What do you think? What do you think
Oh
about
my
that?
God. I would love to ask you this question as well. So maybe I'll start and you should also, give me your thoughts. I think, for me, I bring it down to two things. The first one is that we need to be resilient as a business. At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of companies were, are we going to survive this? Are people going to lose jobs? Are we going to really see, things really break apart? What is going to happen? And if you had resilience in terms of pivoting the business, making sure that you're communicating very consistently to all of your stakeholders, your employees, your partners, your customers, you're constantly communicating what that strategy is looking like and providing a reasonable level of clarity to those, uncertain, conversations and conversations shrouded with uncertainty, then you were able to kind of pivot. And so I take that lesson as not just a company, like when we are building and scaling, how can we be resilient and how can we actually build so that we can pivot? I think that's one big takeaway for us. I think the second big takeaway, Kareem, is that especially in uncertain and difficult times, you have to bring it back to first principles. And when we say first principles at HubSpot, we have one that is a primary one, which is solve for the customer, SFTC. And we have this SFTC, solve for the customer. It's there on the walls. It's on the virtual walls of the company. It's everywhere that we are having the conversations. And why that's important is that when you go through something like we went last year, how do you pivot? What are you going to use to make decisions really quickly? And I'll give you examples. So we talked about March coming back from Dublin and being, in this place where we're like shutting everything down. And in a week's time frame, we had to make a bunch of decisions. And we made decisions like we changed our product pricing completely. We took a number of features that were in the paid product and brought it down into the free product. We created policies that provided payment flexibility for our customers. And we created policies where we provided advanced commissions for a lot of our partners. And we made these decisions in 5 days. Now, in a typical company, this, you've been through a lot of this. Yes. It takes 5 months during a planning process to be able to do this. And so if we step back and said, so how did we make decisions in 5 days? Because it honestly would be great if we can keep doing that. We did it because we said, solve for the customer. What are all the things that we can imagine that we can do that will solve for the customer? It was pretty simple. So if I were to dial back, what am I taking away from, the last 12 to 18 months is, build for resilience, build so that you can pivot, and then break it down into first principles and get everybody aligned on the first principles. Then, you can not just survive big changes, but you can also thrive with big changes that are happening.
100% agree. You can be prepared for everything, but if you are built to be resilient and if you are customer focused, you will do better than if you are not. One thing very important I saw in this time, a lot of companies weren't prepared because they didn't have systems in place that can bring them the knowledge about our customers, the context about the customers. I'm talking about CRM platform, of course.
Right.
How can business use systems like HubSpot to adapt in period like those?
Oh, this is a great question. I mean, look, almost any business strategy has to be enabled by internal systems. Systems are kind of like the foundation for enabling any of the changes. And so if you look back, like what did we need, in the course of what we were seeing last year? We needed customer information. Who is visiting your website? No one was visiting physically anywhere. So who is visiting your website? What pages are they actually touching? What conversations are they having internally with your teams across maybe support or service or sales? And what insights can you actually get from all of those conversations that make the next, discussion with your customer much more insightful and valuable? That's what CRM provides, right? That's what CRM should provide. Now, I'll say, if we step back, I mentioned that I started my career in business with Sibo, and that was a CRM company. And back when I started my career, CRM was about contact information. If I needed to, call you, Karim, I would go into my CRM, I would get your contact information, I'd pick up my phone, and I would call you. The notion of CRM right now has changed dramatically. No one's calling. I'm not calling you. You're visiting my website if you need to find out information. And that's the starting point. Or you may actually download a free product and interact with that free product. That might actually be a front door. Then you're visiting different pages. You're maybe reading blogs. You're maybe taking actions. So CRM right now, the modern version of CRM starts with this digital experience on the website, tracks all of the communication with customers across the multiple channels, and then provides insights so that we can have better interactions. And that's how modern, CRM has really changed. And that's kind of what we provide. Now, we do it in a different way. Our product philosophy, as you know very well, is different. Instead of acquiring different parts, right? Acquiring a CRM solution or a service solution or different parts, we really have taken a different approach of crafting CRM solutions, whether it is marketing or it is sales or it is operations hub, which we recently announced, or service. We build it so that the customer experience when using different parts of it are easy. And we also do that so that our customers are able to adapt really quickly to changes. It makes them much more agile. So that's kind of how I would, talk about the systems and the strategy behind that.
Thank you. Great. I don't know a lot of companies that have a chief customer officer. We may say or think that is something for SaaS company or tech companies. I'm sure that a manufacturing company should have a chief customer officer. What does it mean to have one in your company? To have someone like you at HubSpot caring for the customer and the customer experience?
Look, I think it's a great question. Almost everybody should have a chief customer officer. And here's why. How many times have you called a company that's manufacturing a product and maybe you have a support request and you call them and you give them your name, your address, your phone number, your details. And then they're like, sorry, I can't solve that problem for you, Karim, but let me point you to this other place and I'm going to forward this call so another department gets in. And that department asks you the same information. This is what happens in manufacturing companies and a lot of companies that are very, very siloed. As organizations grow, you end up being in silo. And what happens is that you start designing your systems, your strategy, and your processes for your department. So it might be the support department, which is different from the sales department, which is different from the service department. And manufacturing companies do this all the time. And it results in a really poor customer experience. And the impetus for thinking about, this role is what happens when you bring all of these teams together under one umbrella, starting from marketing to sales, to service, to support, to customer success, and all of the operations around it. And you orient the strategy on how we serve the customer better. Because I think one of the things that, I really think about and we talk about internally at HubSpot is that anytime our customers begin to experience our org structure, we have failed them. And that is why I'd recommend everyone taking a look at, whether you call it chief customer officer or something else, but bringing these teams together and having a common strategy that serves your customers really well.
This is the best way maybe to work on the retention. And we know that in manufacturing companies like the companies you were talking about before, they are not startups. They have a big customer base. They exist from maybe 100 or 200 years, and the retention is everything. And I know you've said that retention is a new acquisition, and starting with bring together all teams is a good way to build this.
Yeah, look, here is the simplest concept, right? Initially, we all in the go-to-market side in almost every industry, we talked about the funnel. And the funnel starts with, do you have leads? And do those leads convert into early stage deals? Do those deals convert into customer? And at the end of the funnel was the customer. And then what happened? Well, the customer didn't get a great experience. And even though you were celebrating, very quickly, they were disillusioned and they would leave. Now, I think the way we think about it is that customer retention is even more important than winning or acquiring that customer. Because when customers are retained, one, they become advocates and they actually talk about your product. Two, they continue to use your product and maybe even buy additional products. And so it creates more of a flywheel effect, which is what we want. And so the concept that we have and we talk about at HubSpot is, what if you put the customer at the center and organize marketing, sales, customer experience around that center so that we can drive that level of retention and continued value for the customer. That's why retention is even more important than acquisition.
How does this retention model, this retention in the new acquisition mindset impact the growth model of a manufacturing company? How can we start focusing on our customers if we are a manufacturing company?
I mean, this is a good question. I think almost any industry, but certainly manufacturing, start with the end, customer experience. If you're a manufacturing company, you're producing something, but at the same time, you have to distribute that, and then you have to service that, and then you have to provide, customer service associated with that. What if you start designing with what does that customer end-to-end customer experience look like, as a manufacturing organization? And which parts of that entire end-to-end customer journey are there rough handoffs between departments or sharp edges that your customers can feel? Is this the transition from sales to actually servicing? Is this the transition from servicing to providing support or getting some self-help? Where is it? And so if you're a manufacturing company, start looking at the process end to end and start mapping out the places where there is significant handoff difficulties or sharp edges. And then once you have that, pick the ones that are the highest priority. So one of the things that we have at HubSpot is something called the growth grader. I don't know if you've seen this, Karim.
Yeah, I've seen this tool. I've seen it.
It's a great one, whether you're a manufacturing vertical or others, but certainly in manufacturing vertical, if you take the growth grader, it basically takes the area of how are you attracting your customers? How are you engaging the customers? How are you actually providing service to the customers? And what are the areas of friction that you feel? And it rates all of these different areas based on best practices, based on peers within the manufacturing industry and peers outside. And then it'll say, well, you're good at attracting, but you're not really good at servicing. Then start there. Start with some way of looking across your customer journey, identifying the pain points and prioritizing the ones. That's the place that I would start. I think in our case, we applied the same thing. We drink our own champagne. So we did our growth grader for ourselves. And we found that we're not leveraging, all of the customer feedback in the right way. And so we ended up creating a voice of the customer program. And so the voice of the customer program becomes the central place where we listen across channels, we get customer feedback, and we are able to say, well, these are the biggest issues that customers are facing right now. They then come and present to the management team. We're then able to prioritize our resources and investments, and we are able to solve the problems that are top of mind to customers at a given time. Now, I'm giving you as an example, but that might change from company to company. But if you're in manufacturing, that's a good place to start. Figure out where you have the biggest sharp edges and put some resources to be able to map that back in terms of customers' feedback.
So you start by eliminating some of the friction in the customer journey. But one thing we can see a lot of time is there is a lot of silos in old companies, not only in old companies or old manufacturing companies, but generally there's a lot of silos because you have a different team, you have different tools, different systems. How do we break them to better serve the customer and to eliminate all of those friction?
Yeah, look, silos are really, really ever present in almost every company. Why? Because we end up growing really quickly. It's not that people start a company and say, you know what, I'm just going to keep my functions so distinctly separate. What happens is that when you start growing really quickly, you're adding people and, suddenly you've gone from 10-person team and here and a 10-person team that could probably exchange ideas to 100 people here and 100 people here, and those suddenly are not able to exchange ideas. We call that problem the big and slow problem. As you start getting bigger, you operate in silos and you start getting very slow, and that's the problem as you begin to kind of operate. So what do? I think the first thing is to, one, recognize that you're getting too siloed and create either a leadership team across those silos, or an organizational structure like we have done. The second part of it is creating a cadence of how you make decisions. What do you have to do every 2 weeks if you have a set of decisions to make? How do you make those decisions across these different silos? And the third, probably a longer term thing, is to align the strategy across these silos. So for example, when we originally started on this journey, if you had asked a salesperson what the strategy and winning aspiration is for sales, they would have said something like, increase the number of customer wins and grow the ARR. If you'd gone to marketing, they would have said, increase the number of qualified leads or, something similar. Now, that's a test. That's a really good test, Kareem, for any organization, is to go and ask, different silos, what is your strategy? And typically they will say something that is very functional. Now, what you want to hear is something focused around the customer, because at the end of the day, businesses are here to serve customers, produce good things and serve the customers, right? That's kind of what we are here for. And so the third step in terms of breaking down the silo is to have a clear strategy that is focused on the customer, that breaks down all of the silos. And so if you go now to a HubSpot team and, within go-to-market, and you ask them, what's the strategy? What's your winning aspiration? They'll say something like, we want to provide great, delightful experiences for our customer. And that's kind of when you know that you've broken down the silos. And it's the step-by-step process of aligning leaders, aligning a decision-making cadence, and aligning strategy, and then making sure your systems and incentives actually support that strategy.
Yeah, great answer. You need to have the same goals for all the teams to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you what will say someone at HubSpot. You already answered.
I just read your mind there.
So something maybe very important, if you want to do this, and I know at HubSpot is something very important, you need to have a great culture. You can do this if your company culture is like, like maybe too old school or too, you need to have a customer focused culture. And this most of the time begins with a great company culture, a great employee culture. I know you have been speaking a lot about diversity and inclusion last year at a Partner Day, or this year maybe in the virtual Partner Day. You speak about diversity and inclusion. Most of companies, maybe here in France or in Europe, are talking about that like something politically correct. We are all doing inclusion, or we all want to work with diversity. But I have the impression, I think, that you at HubSpot are doing something, you are going further, you are doing something better.
Yeah.
Can we end the conversation around this? Because I think it's very important in our case.
Yeah, look, thank you so much for asking this question. It's really important. And you touched on a couple of different points here. First is that culture is really, really important. And then the second point is that diversity is really important in terms of the foundation of the organization. And I couldn't be more aligned. So, you know, at HubSpot, one of the things we say is that we have product and the focus on product. And that's important because it attracts right customers. But we also have our culture, and that's equally important. And we spend a lot of time because it attracts the right employees. And attracting customers is important. Attracting employees is even more important. So the combination of those two are, you know, really important. And then in terms of diversity, a lot of companies kind of take diversity as an initiative. You know, they're like, oh, this year we are focusing on initiative. And you know, you and I know we come from, you know, I'm an immigrant. I came from India, and I think you have a very similar background coming from a different country. You can't treat diversity as a 1-year initiative or some short-term goal. It takes a very long time to have, you know, diversity embedded into the foundation of the organization. And there is enough data and evidence now, Kareem, to say that diversity of thought, diversity in gender, diversity in underrepresented minorities, all kinds of diversity is important and actually is correlated to higher performance of a company. There's just no doubt, there's enough evidence. So I think we stop talking about is diversity important to building diversity into the foundation of everything that we do. And for us at, you know, HubSpot, that's kind of how we think about it. You know, everything that we do, our board is, you know, 50-50 in terms of gender, you know, diversity. We just added in 2020 our first African-American board member. Our management team is 50-50 in terms of diversity. We completely changed how we think about customer advisory boards and partner advisory councils. And we made sure that both the customer advisory boards and partner advisory councils are exceptionally diverse in terms of geographies, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity. We want the most diverse, you know, set of people. And then everything that we do, we have a lens in terms of how is that driving diversity. And so I can't say that we, you know, have reached our goal because, as you and I talked about, it takes many, many years of sustained focus in driving diversity, but we are super committed to it. And we are probably, you know, more committed to it than anything else within the company. And it shows from all our programs and initiatives that we are driving. So I'm so glad that you asked that question.
It's not only good for the community, for the country, but it's good too for the business. That is what you are saying. We have evidence today that more diversity is more, it's significant to more business and more customers and better company.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That will be the conclusion. I'm very happy that you accepted my invitation. Thank you very much, Yamini. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure talking to you. You are such a great partner. You've had some amazing success within the ecosystem, and I know that you make our customers successful. So it's a pleasure. Thank you for